Alright guys, thought I'd do another video today as I'm out and about on my daily walk. Try not to get too dragged into the politics at the minute, but it's becoming difficult because things are becoming more and more transparent and obvious. I believe we're starting to see some issues with eggs, bizarrely. And not long after, people had to start registering what poultry they have at home. Not saying things seem very closely linked, and I do think the World Economic Forum's got a lot to play for a lot of the stuff that's happened in recent years. We do seem to be down this global agenda route, and as individuals we need to work out the best ways of playing it. It's funny, when I was listening to people talking about the influx of immigration, if it carries on in the West the way it is, all you're going to have is economies that mirror the places these people have come from. Why? Because most of them don't actually add to the economy. And it may not even be a fault of their own, but beyond the fact of arriving. But we're in the rise of AI, we're in the rise of automation. We don't need people with zero skills or very low skills. There's already enough Uber drivers, Uber Eats, and people that work in restaurants, etc. There's already an undercurrent of illegal cash in hand work that is not sort of being dealt with. There's already enough barber shops and other things that are up to whatever they get up to. But the more strain that comes onto the economy, the less people will have in their pocket. And I've even heard it from an economic point of view that reality is, if we were taxed more, that people could afford housing and stuff, which for me is ludicrous in the modern society, the way that the land ownership is. My personal view is, like a ball that's inflated, the best thing to do is actually take some of the air out. I know some people will complain about devaluing the house prices and devaluing rents, but bizarrely, if you got houses back to being a home instead of a commercial enterprise, then the cost of living will go down for most people. The standard of life will go up. And a lot of it is about actually, like I said, taking the air out the tyre. And the air out the tyre in this sense it's a population problem. And I'm not interested in ageing population nonsense, because if you look at it from a bigger perspective, if your population is declining, surely as it declines, it stabilises as it declines. You may get people die off or whatever through natural causes, etc. But the system will adjust to its users. But it also has that added feature, as more people die off and there's less people, the people that are still alive, they own more because they inherit it. So why not deflate the tyres? We don't owe the world a living. And I'm looking at this from a big perspective, because funny enough, I was having this conversation with my wife, who's from the Philippines. Because when you get into the issue around slavery and colonialism and whatever, so okay, why do only certain parties seem to want to benefit from it? So we look at it from the big picture. A lot of the people that went into slavery, because let's start with African. So a lot of that was occurring by people selling them to the white folk, because disease was a major issue. So white folk really didn't go well in Africa and often died. So people brought the Africans to them. And you can guess what people those were. Then you get into the reality that it's often tribal, and still is. They just don't want to talk about it. You Zulus, well, it doesn't matter where you go, Zulus, Hutus, you know, you look at Hotel Rwanda and look at that, and you can blame the colonials, but it wasn't the colonials that were decided to butcher each other. And no, they weren't all peace-loving and friendly people prior to that either. They had slaves from the ones they kidnapped from other villages and other tribes. It's not a unique thing. In fact, making it very blacks are owed something by the whites, for me, sounds very racist. Let's take it a bit further out. Land clearances in the United Kingdom. Irish and Scottish used as slavery for Jamaica and places like that because they were cheaper than slaves. But let's take it further out. Vikings kept slaves. So that takes us into other parts of Europe. And then we go, okay, and like the Germanics and many others and the Brits, we were taken by the Romans. So Italy owes us repatriations in that mindset. And my wife's owed money from Spain for repatriation. And New Zealand, not only were they conquered there, but they also ate the people that were there. No, it's not mad, read it up. So they actually ate the original natives and now laying claim to everything, because I think they've only been there, 400, 600 years? So the white folk there were a problem, but eating the people that were originally there wasn't a problem at all. I'm just saying it for the factors, the lunacy of this stuff. But it's all coming out of the colleges and universities. This is what's feeding this. People are being downgraded on their knowledge. You look at what your kids are learning and compare it to what you were learning. And compare the difference between education and ideologies. Because in reality, the problems we've got are ideologies. They're dumbing down people, and they've dumbed down what I'd say 3 generations so far. Which, for me, it's fantastic. I'm going to have a job for until I die, if I want one. Because there are a lot of people out there incapable of basic stuff. Which means less competition for the complex stuff. In the same way, we don't actually deal with the real problems. Like engineering has got a shortfall of staff and has for a long time. Well, even when I was back in school, which 1989, take it back to 1989. So back then there was a massive shortage in engineering. And it continues. Everybody wants to be the manager, but nobody actually wants to be the person who does the work. Worse than that, nobody wants to be the person that understands the work or capable of doing the work. They just want to dictate and tell other people what to do. Well, you can only have so many managers. That's where the old term, too many chiefs, not enough Indians, comes to mind. And no, I don't see that as being racist either. It's just an interpretation of the same problem from a different, well, yeah, slightly different perspective, but same problem. So the reason I bring all this stuff up is because, quite simply, most of it's lunacy. I mean, it's like I was listening to Oprah leaving the US. What's her name? Rosie O'Donnell. That I only remember being fat and miserable. That's all I can remember. I don't even know what she did. She's gone to Ireland. Oh, wow. I know I do these videos, but it's mainly because I have a following over the years and I've sort of kept with it. I know I don't do it as often as I should, but sometimes there's not a lot to say. Sometimes some of the stuff's a bit political, so I just delete it, because if it's got no positive output, I don't see the point. So what's my positive output on this? Well, if you're young, if you train as an engineer, which isn't that hard depending what you like. I mean, I wouldn't do electronics these days. AI I can see being of value, but I can see that getting saturated quite quickly. Internet of Things technology, I think there's a lot of growth in that coming up, because I'll be tied with the energy costs. Renewables is obviously an ongoing piece, which I can see that market transitioning over time, because at the moment the big push on electric cars and stuff will exist for the time being, but I don't see electric cars being the solution. Why? Well, if you look at the way the UK gets its power, there's your first issue from a UK perspective. If you're an American perspective, distance is the major issue, because everything's bloody miles away. Technology wise, I think we're on the cusp of other technologies coming up, but personally I wouldn't say it as the be all or end all solution for the world. But we'll see what happens. But as an engineer, I'd recommend gas is going to continue whether people like it or not. They keep saying it'll finish in 2030 or whatever. But reality is, it's all like saying we're going to knock it on the head, but where's the solutions, guys? Electrics, obviously electrical power is going to continue, and becoming qualified an electrician isn't that intensive. So if you're a cable runner and do basic installs and stuff, I don't think you probably do it within 3 years. You may not be able to get an apprenticeship. It's fine. Just get your qualifications and just start out on your own if you can. Because the reason I say start on your own is A, you'll earn more money, but B, you control your destination. The same with doing BMS work. There's always demand for BMS. Building management system, sorry. There's always demand for gas engineers because there's less and less of them. People are retiring all the time. Plumbing, there is some money in it, but at the same time, I'd probably choose carpentry over plumbing because it's a little bit harder, but you can always roll back and do the plumbing. But if you're doing plumbing in gas, your quid's in. A lot of these, I would say, work for yourself. The reason being is half your neighbours, once they know you're a gas engineer, will quite happily do cash deals with you and favours for you servicing their boilers. Ongoing income for next 20 years. What else do I recommend? You probably noticed, like I say, I'm sort of curbing away a little bit from the AI and stuff, because those things sort of go in fads, or the fact that people are piling billions into them. You're not going to be able to maintain something unless you've got something very unique. You're not going to be able to contain and compete with that momentum. The opportunity is in either selling the information, teaching people how to do it, like how to become whatever AI specialist, and selling those courses and bits and pieces on that. But there's so much information out there now, it's probably already saturated, which leaves a lot of the stuff out there that's solid ground, like being an electrician, being a carpenter, being a plumber, is a little bit more hard work. It's probably going to take you 2 or 3 years. But in the long term, firstly, you can get a job for life. Not that everybody wants a job for life these days. But it's your hands. Your hands are the skill. You can take it with you. The way I used to do this was I'd work in peaks and troughs. So you think, well, if I do that, I'm never going to travel. It's like, well, if you work for 6 months of the year and travel for 6 months, it's doable. Get in with one of these agencies like Hayes, for example, that has a lot of temp work. You just run a contract, do it, disappear, and then before you're coming back off your holiday, touch base with your agent, and they start looking for work for you again. Like I said, the demand's there. I've never been out of work in engineering. It's not paid the greatest, but I'm now sitting at a salary just under 100k a year, and been in Spain for a few months, and I'm going back to work next month. But ultimately, life's what you want to make it. The travelling bit, it's fantastic if you do it that way. That's how I was being able to commute between the Philippines and the UK regularly, because I was coming back for work contracts. Here in Spain now, it's more long term. I mean, to be perfectly frank, job offer, job application come in today, yesterday, asking if I wanted to apply for some jobs in the Netherlands. So I thought, you know what, I've been in the Netherlands since the 80s, so yeah, go on then. And as you've probably seen, we started off with quite a negative, the world's a mess type thing. Talked about some of the, I want a free handout stuff, and then we've moved on to the reality is, the world still moves on. You focus on yourself, you focus on where you want to go, you focus on what you want to achieve. The noise will continue, it always has done. All the doom and gloom, I look at it from a bigger picture. I know some of you guys may or may not agree, but we haven't had the plague. We had the false pandemic thing, in my perspective and my viewpoint. I don't believe it was needed. I think the rates and that just don't look right, and the way it was all locked down and stuff seemed very much too organised to be true. But parking that, the US hasn't had a major crisis internally since the Twin Towers and its political landscape. But even that, what people forget is what the elections are for. If you're not happy, wait till the next election. If you are happy, great. But I do think people need to wake up to the amount of corruption that was going on with this stuff in USAID. Not just locally, but it seemed like globally it wasn't a good plan. Adding to that, we don't control these things. We control our localised environment, our bubble. So if you let this stuff leak into your bubble, the only person who's responsible for that is you. So, like me here, I'm looking out and thinking the water's pretty clear now, it's looking nice. Got shed loads of that crap. I'm not sure if that's seaweed. But the truck will come up with a digger and he'll take all that away somewhere. But then I look at the plastic bags and think, what's wrong with people? So from one side, I'm looking thinking, great day, wind's fairly low, sun's shining. I like walking in this jetty, you probably know I walk this a lot. And I stand here and look out and think, how lucky I am to have this environment. So even when I look down at the plastic bags floating around in the water, I'm thinking, dirty, dirty people. But it's not in the context of I'm hating or getting annoyed. It's how do we get the plastic out? So, yeah. And I think that's how to look at life. You can always see the problems. If you look for it, you can always find the solutions. If you look for it, and if you can't see the solutions, it's probably worth just switching off from it. Why? Because you can't fix it. All it's going to do is cause frustration, maybe a bit of hate, maybe a bit of annoyance, maybe some sleepless nights, maybe addiction to something, maybe pushing the dopamine and spending way too much time on a computer, you name it. Yet in reality, our environments change constantly. So even if you've got a bad boss, give it 2 years, probably going to move on or get fired. If you're struggling with finances at the minute, recommend getting a sheet and working out where you're losing money. It may be that some things are very high interest rates and hit those first. And then once you get the momentum going, it becomes quite easy to clear your debts. I know somebody's going to easier said than done, but in reality, if you don't get a grip on it, it won't change. You're going to be sitting there thinking the bailiff's going to knock the door, sleepless nights, coming home late maybe to avoid anybody knocking the door. It's not a way to live. And if it's got to the point where it's just not financially viable anymore, have a look at other options. Going bust may be the best option for you. May not be the best option for the bank, but that's why they don't like people going bankrupt. Because if you go bust, you're not going to pay it back. They can liquidate everything you own. What's that movie with Tom Hanks, Larry something? I think that's a good version of it, in the sense of he just handed the keys into the bank, downsized, got a little apartment and just moved on. Because I'll give you a bit of a context. You're not taking it with you. When you're dead, you're dead. The more you own, the more frustrations you have, the more headaches, the more responsibilities, the more costs. The less you have, the more freedom you have. It sounds a little bit crazy, but in reality, if I just had that place in Northampton and not the house in Spain with the mortgage and stuff, and a family, my costs would be about a third of what they are. So there's a pure perspective of it. And that's not me being negative, because I wouldn't change anything for the world. I'm not whinging about it. But in reality, the more you have, the more it costs. So if you're hitting a hard time, like for example, you're leasing an expensive car, maybe time to get rid of it. Get yourself a cheap runaround. if you're living in a 4-bedroom house and you only need a 1-bedroom apartment, downsize. There's always a solution, and not all of them you're going to like. But if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Because going down is as hard as going up sometimes. But the big thing about being debt-free, etc., is the peace of mind. The peace of mind, the control, regaining your self-respect, regaining your ownership of your own life, regaining your bank balance. Instead of spending 30 years paying off your debts to the bank. If you're really struggling and going bust, struggling for 6 years, you know, people say, oh, you'll never own a home again. And you weren't owning the home you're living in. All you're doing is, if your debts are that bad, you're probably never going to own it anyway. You're just servicing bank debt. There's a few thoughts for today anyway. And like I said, it's not about being negative, it's finding the peace in amongst all this noise. It's finding how to get content and happy where you need to be. Because everyone's trying to make noise all the time, and it's what's wrong with the world. Should be trying to make people happy, content and peaceful. Thanks for watching.